Greetings. See, it is necessary for the enemy to tell the lie to his own people, to get them to believe the fact that the black man is not the original man. Get them to believe that the Caucasian is the original man and the new man on the planet. It don't make sense. So what I do is I get the Caucasian to spill the beans on his own self, not knowing that he been lied to too. Some of them do, like this one.
And today I want to talk about Afghanistan and the decline of America. There have been a lot of news stories about this, but I think it's important to view it in the context of a couple of things. In the context of late empire decadence and bureaucracy, which often leads to the fall of one superpower and the rise of a new superpower, which itself is always accompanied by the end of one currency regime and the start of a new currency regime. So in order to talk about this, we obviously have to rewind back to 9/11, back to September 11th. And looking back on it, I have to say that this was really a turning point. Pre-9/11, it was much easier. I would say the country was much more innocent. It was much easier, though not always possible, but much easier to trust politicians, to trust experts, to trust military experts, to trust the news programs on TV. Post 9/11, things began to get really weird, and we began to have a lot more political polarization and a lot of events happening that were very difficult to understand and that are still very difficult to understand. Obviously, 9/11 was a huge human tragedy. Almost 3,000 people died, the vast majority of them completely innocent people going to the office or riding on an airplane. In terms of the insurance losses, the monetary cost, approximately $40 billion. I believe this includes both the skyscrapers and the airplane. So there was a loss of human life. There's a monetary loss. But the response was very strange, and the response was actually ended up being much more expensive than the original attacks. So of the 19 men who participated in the 9/11 attacks, all of them affiliated with Al-Qaeda, they came from just 4 countries, 15 of them from Saudi Arabia, 2 from UAE, 1 from Lebanon, and 1 from Egypt. So the really bizarre thing that happened then is we turned around and invaded Afghanistan and invaded Iraq. This is one of the really strange things. Iraq makes a little bit of sense because Saddam had recently started selling his oil for euros, the recently created euro, and this threatened the whole petrodollar system. So in one sense, I think 9/11 was used as a shield or an excuse to attack Saddam, whom the U.S. had supported for many years, and then obviously fought the first Gulf War against him under George W.'s father, the senior George Bush. But the really strange thing was invading Afghanistan. We have this famous quote from Alexander the Great: "May God keep you away from the venom of the cobra, the teeth of the tiger, and the revenge of the Afghans." The people, especially the neocons surrounding George W. Bush, really did not understand history. They did not understand how Britain was humiliated just a century, or call it a century and a half earlier, trying to invade Afghanistan, being repulsed. The same thing happened with the Soviets. Ironically, during this war, the U.S. was actually funding Osama bin Laden to fight against the Soviets, and many believe that Osama bin Laden was actually directly trained by the CIA. So we have this strange thing where the U.S. supports Saddam Hussein, Osama bin Laden, then turns against them. Very strange stuff like this. But when we look at the context of 3,000 people dying and 40 billion in losses, the wars that resulted from 9/11 as a result of human choice, they were not inevitable. These cost approximately $6.5 trillion dollars. And the human cost, the number of U.S. soldiers and allied lives, civilians on the ground in all these countries, innocent women and children, quote unquote, collateral damage. This cost was huge. And if we want to look at the context for it, 6.4 trillion is approximately 21% of the current U.S. debt outstanding, the public debt in terms of treasuries, not off-balance sheet debt, but on-balance sheet debt. So this is a huge amount of money that was financed using debt for a series of senseless wars. We did end up eventually getting Saddam Hussein, and we did end up getting Osama bin Laden. Osama bin Laden was captured more using Palantir software than any sort of military force. What makes this kind of spending possible, this sort of superpower spending possible? Well, it's the exorbitant privilege of being able to print US dollars. And one of the great historical ironies is that this retreat from Afghanistan happened 50 years, I believe to the day, to the Nixon shock, when Nixon suspended the convertibility of the US dollar into gold. When you're no longer anchored or bound to hard assets, it's very easy to print up a lot of money and go fight wars. If you're finding this video helpful so far,
the American empire is coming to an end. Overseeing this descent at the highest levels of the federal and state governments is a motley collection of imbeciles, con artists, thieves, opportunists, and warmongering generals, and to be clear, I include the Democratic Party. Short of a sudden and widespread popular revolt, the death spiral appears unstoppable, meaning the United States as we know it will no longer exist in a decade, or at most, 2.
History teaches us one thing. Change is inevitable. This most ancient truth has been illustrated time and time again as every great empire, no matter how powerful, eventually falls. In every instance, wise men have predicted their empire's end, but their dire warnings went unheeded. Is it possible that in modern times this may be happening close to home? Could America be headed for catastrophe?
My dad's the devil. The United States of America is about to come under the divine chastisement of the Most High. This will be the shock of the hour. This nation, great and terrible, the likes that mankind has never seen, with its economic and military power and prowess that's only comparable to nations in antiquity, such as ancient Rome and Greece, and that of ancient Egypt. The United States had its peak from the 1950s to the 1980s. Now with the United States national debt at 18 trillion, unemployment numbers are at some of the highest it's ever been, along with consumer spending down to unprecedented levels. The United States will one day be called the late and great United States.
Peace and greetings to all. I just wanted to post a quick video to share and promote that the Fall of America audio readings are now available on podcasts, and with it you can listen to the entire book on the following platforms that I'm aware of that thus far have the podcasts that I've looked up, and they are Radio Public, Breaker, Spotify, Pocket Cast, Google Podcasts, and Anchor. Now, I listed off these platforms in the order of my preferred platform to listen to the podcast on, and the top four again are Radio Public, Breaker, Spotify, and Pocket Cast. And reason being because in their apps you can arrange the episodes or the chapters from oldest to newest. So
Chapter 1. The Opening. In the name of Allah,
the most gracious, the most merciful. All praise be to Allah, the Lord of the worlds, the most gracious, the most merciful, Master of the Day of Judgment. You alone we worship, and you alone we seek for help. Guide us to the straight way, the way of those on whom you have bestowed your favor, not of those who earned your anger, nor of those who went astray.
The Honorable Elijah Muhammad writes, the four great judgments that Almighty God Allah is bringing upon America are rain, hail, snow, and earthquakes. He writes, we see them now covering all sides of America, as the Holy Quran prophesies, curtailing her on all her sides. And these judgments would push the people into the center of the country. And there they would realize that it is Allah God who is bringing them and their country to a naught. What do you mean, pushing the people into the center of the country? He told me to tell you, and he wrote it himself, that the coastlines, all of them, will be destroyed. And some of your own scientists are talking about global warming and the melting of the glaciers. This is not an accident. You want to say that it's what we are doing and we have some responsibility, but the God of heaven is doing this. And as these glaciers melt, the waters of the Pacific and the Atlantic are going to rise. And as they rise, they will overspread and destroy your border. In the east, the Atlantic coast, the west, the western coast, the Gulf. It's happening now, but it will get worse as you continue your rebellion against God.
Greetings. Assalamu alaikum. Black Light, Elder Black Light. So all you brothers stop playing with Allah. You know what I'm talking about. Sarnetta, Inky, Tahaka Bay, Polite, Young Pharaoh, this is the shock of the hour. So, Uncle Sam, your arms are too short to box with Allah, the original Asiatic black man, the owner, the maker, cream of the planet Earth, God of the universe, from the lost found nation of Shabazz, the greater taker is in the house.